All right, welcome back, Powers on Sports podcast. Our guest this week, Matt Zemek, USA Today Trojan Wire editor, covers all things USC as well as the Pac-12, college football nationwide, has a wide array of expertise in the world of college football. So we are going to hit it with Matt here as we enter the second half of the year. Had a big week in the Pac-12 last week, a classic up in Seattle, Oregon, and Washington, 39-36, I believe, was the final there. You had USC getting pounded up in South Bend. I think some people maybe didn't see the beating coming, but they saw USC on the verge of losing. So we'll get Matt's thoughts on USC up in South Bend. But welcome into the podcast, Matt.
Always great to be on, Jason.
All right, before we get to the football, I got to ask you about the hype and the hysteria of your Diamondbacks in Phoenix. Game 2 of the NLCS going on tonight. What has been the outcry and the excitement level in Phoenix with the Diamondbacks coming out of nowhere to get to the NLCS?
Well, you know that the Suns and Lakers have a very old, treasured rivalry in this town in Phoenix. In Boston and Philadelphia, they chant beat LA. Well, they do that in Phoenix as well. So to sweep the Dodgers, just absolutely thrash them like that makes every resident of Phoenix feel really good. So really, just kicking the Dodgers' butt up and down the field, that's a season maker for this team. And let's remember this about the Diamondbacks. They lost 19 of 24 in late July, early August. I mean, that ship was sinking. It's one of the, imagine how many playoff teams in human history, in the long history of baseball, the World Series goes back to 1903. How many playoff teams, lost 19 of 24, were 16 over 500 at one point in the season, then fell underneath 500, then came back over 500 and made the playoffs, and then won a playoff series and swept. They swept 2 playoff series. They swept the Brewers before they swept the Dodgers. So, this is a one-of-a-kind journey. How many teams can you say did all the things that the Diamondbacks did, for better or worse? And, they won 84 games. So they're trying to replicate the 2006 St. Louis Cardinals, who won it all with 83 wins. But of course, as I speak, the Phillies are leading 3-0 in game 2, but still sweeping the Dodgers is going to make this season a success. And I think it's reasonable to say, this franchise is ahead of schedule. They weren't expecting to be a playoff team this year. Now, of course, part of the reason that they are a playoff team is that the Mets and the Padres and the Cardinals, all 3 had disappointing seasons. All 3 of them needed to be bad in order for the Diamondbacks, also the Marlins, to get in there. But nevertheless, these young guys got playoff experience, and they can carry that into next year. And if they get some pitching reinforcements, they need a few more arms in the bullpen.
Yep.
And they need another strong starter. If they can get that in the off season to supplement this exciting young core with Corbin Carroll, they will have the makings of a team that really, could be like what the Phillies have been. The Phillies aren't going to beat the Braves over 162. We've seen that, but that doesn't matter. Just get in as a wild card. And then if you have the dangerous hitting and the high-end pitching that the Phillies have, you can go all the way. And so the Diamondbacks could have that same mix. They're not going to beat the Dodgers over 162. But again, don't need to. Just need to beat them in a best of 5. So the Diamondbacks really could be on to something.
Well, I'll give you another team that lost 7, that won 7 out of 30 in late July, early August. Has not lost a playoff game yet and is up 2-0 on the Houston Astros. That'd be the Texas Rangers. And so both teams that are kind of defying expectations had massive swoons in kind of the with about 60 games to go, and it's incredible to believe that both those teams are in the league championship series.
Absolutely. Yeah, Texas was 24 over 500 and I think slipped all the way down to like
well, it went
maybe
7 and 23 over 30 games.
Yeah. So they were down to like 11 or 10 over 500.
Yeah.
They were 2.5 games out of the wild card
Right.
before they swept the Blue Jays 4 straight in mid-September to
Yep.
briefly find their footing. And then they lost 4 more. They lost 3 in a row to Cleveland. They lost 1 to Boston.
Right.
And then were able to rescue that sinking ship. Yeah, no, it's crazy. And like, a tangent on this. I mean, you started asking about the Diamondbacks here in Phoenix, but we have to say, like 162 doesn't matter right now. We can hope for that, but right now that's not the reality. We got to move the division series to best of 7. And we got to do, I think, a few other things to make 162 mean more. One idea that I've seen, and I really like it, in the wild card series, the first 2 games are a doubleheader, a same-day doubleheader. And then
I thought of that actually about a week ago.
Yep, and if you need that third game, then it's the next day, and then you have to play a game the day after that, game 1 of the division series, at the higher seat. Like, you need to make it a real obstacle course. Like, you need to make it like Survivor.
Right. No, that's a great point.
Really tough for the lower seed. I think I hope Major League Baseball will implement that reform in the offseason.
That's a good. I actually did think of that last week when everybody was talking about the Braves and the Dodgers getting swept in Baltimore. Yeah, because there's only 2 ways to do it. You either have a 1-game wild card, or you have to shorten to make it a 3-game series. You shorten it to maybe 2 days and make them play that next day with no off day. That's the idea, to where you only give the winning teams about 3 days off, 3 to 4 days off, which is manageable, as opposed to having 6 days off, which makes it more challenging for sure. All right.
Yes.
Let's get to the college football world. At our point here, we're in week 8 here of the college football season. We had the Classic last week up in Seattle, 39-36. The second time now we've had a coach who's made a couple of just very, very questionable decisions. Obviously, we had Mario Cristobal with the no kneel down, which ruined Miami's perfect season. And now we have Dan Lanning, who just too aggressive, in my opinion. You have to kick the field goal at the end of the first half, in my opinion. The 4th down play in the fourth quarter is debatable, because if you make the 4th down, the game's over. But if you don't make it, you give Washington the ball at basically the 45-yard line, your own 45. Just give me your overall thoughts of the game, and your thoughts on Dan Lanning's decision making throughout the game.
Yeah, so this is something where analytics, they're not a bad thing, but you can't make them the holy Bible. Like, the analytics says, and then like that, you don't need to think. You actually need to think. You actually need to look at the game in front of you.
Right.
You need to look at time and score, and you need to actually make a choice based on common sense, instead of just pointing to a laminated sheet and say, oh, the analytics tells me. No, the analytics are meant to help you think. The analytics are not meant to take away thought. That is a key thing. So my whole stance on analytics is, it's a guide, but it's not the gospel. It's not the Bible. It's not like the final word on everything. If you are down by 2 scores, and by kicking a field goal, you can be down by 1 score, you kick the field goal
every time.
So I don't have a problem with going for the touchdown right before halftime, down 4, changing it to down 1 with a field goal. Why not try to take the lead? Why not try to get some extra momentum? And I don't have a problem with in the fourth quarter trying to end the game with the guy you think is your Heisman quarterback. Put the game in Bo Nix's hands. And let's remember, a year ago in Eugene, Dan Lanning went for him 4th and 1 against Washington, but Bo Nix was not on the field for that 4th down. I think you and I talked about it
right
on your podcast. Because Nix was not on the field, Washington was able to crash down on the run, sell out, and stop it. So, like, if you're not going to have Bo Nix on the field, you need to be punting. So that's what, analytics doesn't tell you that. It's particular details of situations. So from this game, on Saturday, the fourth down I have a real problem with, instead of kicking the field goal, was when he was down 11, 29-18 in the third quarter. You kick a field goal, you're down one score, 8
Right.
points, 29-21. If you're down 11 or 10 or 9, the field goal puts you down 8, 7, or 6, one score. So a field goal has huge value in the second half of a game. And on the flip side, if you are leading by 6 or 7 or 8, a field goal takes you from being up one score to being up 2 scores. So the analytics say what they say, but you just need to look at time and score and make a common sense judgment for yourself. And so that's the thing with coaches. They need to study these things, but you also have the game in front of you. What's the score? How much value does a field goal give to me? And if a field goal gives you a lot of value, then you ignore the analytics. You go with basic common sense right in front of you. So Lanning seems to be on autopilot. He seems to go for a fourth down every time, no matter what, as a philosophy of high volume. I take enough chances, I'm going to hit on some, and I'm going to get overall increased value. No, you have to do it case by case in the situation you have, the team in front of you, the opponent in front of you. That is where Dan Lanning falls short. You have to pick your spots. This cannot be an automatic trigger kind of thing.
And to me, the one at the end of the first half is 3 points. There's not going to be another possession in the half. So you take the 3 points and you go from 4 to 1 because there's no more possessions in the first half. It's not like there was a minute left in the half and you can burn, if you make it, whatever. And it's from the 3 or 4 yard line. It wasn't from the 1 yard line either. It was 4th and goal from the 3 or 4 yard line.
That is true. And that matters. Yes.
And that does matter. Absolutely.
That does definitely matters. Absolutely.
And so to me, that was the egregious one. And to me, I like Herb Street and Fowler, but when Herb Street says, oh, yeah, I agree with his aggressiveness, that's the way he coaches. When he never criticizes the guy for not going for it, I cannot stand that in the broadcast. And I know Herb Street wants to kiss up to these coaches and needs access, and I get it. But you have to, if you're Herb Street, you have to criticize some of these fourth down moves. You can't say, well, I love the aggressiveness. Well, you didn't love it when he didn't make it. You don't love it when he didn't make it. You don't say a word at the end of the game when he doesn't make it and he loses by 3 points. Those are things just from a broadcasting perspective I can't stand.
And you make a great point that there is a different, we talk about going for it on fourth down as though it's this generic, umbrella blanket like principle. But yeah, it matters whether it's 4th and 3 or 4th and inches. It matters whether it's 4th and 4 or 4th and 1. Like that should definitely be factored into the equation. Like it's not just fourth down, it's how much and where.
Right.
And what kind of defense are you going up against? Absolutely.
Right. So, all right. So now again, we've seen now 2 coaches make some disastrous, end game decisions that have cost them undefeated seasons. Now, again, we'll talk about Utah or Oregon here in a second, but from Washington's perspective, great win for Washington. Obviously, they have USC on the road in a couple of weeks. Talk to me about Washington. Are they good enough to run the table? And obviously, we'll get to USC in a second, but from Washington's perspective, the offense is terrific. Is the defense good enough to be able to hold up the rest of the way in the Pac-12?
I think, I think the defense is good enough, but I think the bigger question just is, can Washington play elite football? The way it plays at home at Husky Stadium, can Washington carry that over to the road? Because Washington almost lost to Arizona, won by only 7 in Tucson. Can Washington play a really strong game away from home? And so looking ahead on the schedule, Jason, there's the USC road game. There's also a road game at Oregon State in Corvallis. So can Washington solve those 2 tests? Now, the way USC is playing certainly looks like Washington's going to beat USC in Los Angeles. I mean, like USC has talent, but, USC's been bad. USC's been a bad team over the past month, except for the first half against Colorado. USC's not playing well at all. If the Trojans, don't shape up, like Washington should mow them down. But then Oregon State's defense was so good last year. That defense has really dropped off this year. Washington State's been obliterated the last 2 weeks, but Washington State had no problem scoring against Oregon State, and Oregon State made UCLA's struggling offense look good for portions of that game. Now, caveat, Oregon State got a big lead and was playing prevent defense for a good portion of the second half. So it's not as though the Oregon State defense collapsed, but nevertheless, UCLA's offense did look comparatively better than it had in previous weeks. But Oregon State has to play a lot better on defense to stop Michael Penix when the Huskies go up to Corvallis. But right now, if you ask me, I think Washington's going unbeaten. I really do. And like this does not historically happen in the Pac-12. I know that usually teams step on a rake when they're on the verge of making the playoff, but I really like the way this is all lining up for Washington. I think the biggest challenge for Washington ultimately would be a rematch with Oregon in Las Vegas in the Pac-12 championship game. That would be the toughest game left.
And that Arizona win's looking better and better as well as Arizona's playing. So I mean that's actually looking to be a very good road win compared. Does the Pac-12 want a one-loss Washington and a one-loss Oregon, or do they want an undefeated Washington and a one-loss Oregon in theory in the title game?
Oh, unbeaten Washington and one-loss Oregon, because Washington and Oregon, you want them to both take care of business against USC and then have that rematch in Las Vegas. And it would, because like if Washington can beat Oregon twice, like that would be amazing, to beat a rival, a formidable rival twice. But then if, Oregon barely lost on the road to Washington. So then if you play again on a neutral field,
right,
it will feel like, Oregon had earned a second chance at the Huskies. And if they do beat them in the rematch on a neutral field, I don't think any people will say that, the Ducks were lucky or that Washington got a raw deal. So I would go for Washington unbeaten and Oregon with one loss.
Let's go to your beat, USC. I mean, just a disastrous performance up in South Bend, thoroughly beaten, turnovers galore by I almost get the sense that, I hate to say this, that Lincoln Riley's offense is getting figured out by good defenses. I mean, it's almost like it's sandlot football. With one thing I don't ever see Caleb Williams doing, I don't see Caleb Williams taking a 3 or 5 step drop and bam, back foot, throws the ball. It's always a scramble. It's always running around. There doesn't seem to be much fluidity. From what I've seen, tell me if I'm wrong, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of fluidity in that USC offense.
Yeah, so to me, it starts with the offensive line. Like you had a really, really strong offensive line at USC last year, and let's look at the personnel that USC doesn't have this year. Andrew Voorhees, Brett Nealon, Bobby Haskins. Now Voorhees and Nealon, they were holdovers from the Clay Helton era. They stuck around. Haskins was a transfer pickup from Virginia, but all three of those guys were excellent for last year's USC offensive line. You take them out of the equation, this offensive line is playing a lot worse. I mean, this offensive line has struggled in 3 of its last 4 games, the one exception being Colorado. But this offensive line has struggled at Arizona State, against Arizona, and at Notre Dame. And like they just got punched in the mouth by Notre Dame. When Notre Dame physically overwhelmed this USC offensive line, Caleb Williams got skittish. And, USC fans have been wanting Lincoln Riley to run the ball more, especially on 1st and 10. He did that several times on Saturday. Like he did what a lot of USC fans wanted, but couldn't do anything behind that offensive line. So the bottom line is, Jason,
is it talent? Is it talent or is it scheme?
I think it's coaching.
That's what I'm saying. Right.
USC is a soft team. Like that is just the bottom line. USC is soft. The defense was soft for most of the season, but this past Saturday, it was the offensive line, which was soft. But like Lincoln Riley probably needs to fire his strength coach, who's not getting it done. And in addition to firing Alex Grinch, he needs, like, the USC strength and conditioning does not seem to be producing tough players. You compare that to the way Washington and Oregon, there was a lot of hitting. That was a very physical game. It felt like a heavyweight battle. And then you compare that to USC, and USC is just very soft. And also the team that USC is going to face this Saturday, Utah. I mean, Utah's whole identity is physicality, punch you in the mouth. We're going to wear you down. We're going to make you feel our weight, our force, our velocity. And Utah has what is widely regarded as a very good strength and conditioning program. So to me, that's what's showing up here, the strength and conditioning. The other part, though, USC coaches have not made good evaluations with their transfer portal pickups. Like, think about all the transfers that USC brought in, not for last year, but for this year. Like Dorian Singer, the transfer from Arizona, the wide receiver, total bust. He can't get open. He can't get separation. Jordan Addison, on the other hand, like, he was an amazing transfer last year.
Right.
He totally took the top off opposing defenses. He opened up the field for everybody else. Dorian Singer was supposed to be that guy, but he's not. Anthony Lucas on the defensive line, transfer from Texas A&M. You haven't heard about him all season. Now, there have been a couple nice transfer pickups. Mason Cobb at linebacker, Jamil Muhammad as pass rusher, edge rusher. They've been good, but most of the transfers for USC this year have not panned out. Last year they had a much better success rate with their incoming transfers. You also think of Travis Dye last year. They really miss him as well. From the Oregon Ducks, he was a huge glue guy for that team. There's no glue guy on this offense. So the USC coaches, they're not getting their players to play tough, but they also aren't making good evaluations in the transfer portal. And that's worth mentioning because, the transfer portal has the ability to instantly improve a roster, but it also means if you don't hit home runs in the portal, you're left with a lot of deficient pieces. And so if you're relying on the portal and you swing and miss, you're not developing players within your program with your recruitment and your own off-season training regimen. And so USC's in real trouble. And the other piece of this puzzle, why USC needs to be concerned long term, is, USC's recruiting has really dried up. USC has not picked up a single 2024 recruit since 4th of July weekend. And, doing other USC shows on various outlets, I said, fans, don't worry. As long as the team wins and you get proof of concept and the USC's playing in the big games late in the season, the recruits will come. Well, USC might not be playing in any big games late in the season. I mean, if USC loses to Washington on November 4, that's pretty much it. Trojans are going to be out of the Pac-12 race pretty much because they probably would then lose to Oregon as well. They go to the Holiday Bowl. They're going to be removed from any New Year's Six.
And Caleb Williams won't be playing in the Holiday Bowl.
And he will not be playing in the Holiday Bowl. Absolutely. And USC is going to drift off the radar screen. And people are going to say, well, this is a soft program. Lincoln Riley's not coaching well. And recruiting could take a dive. And USC could be in real trouble heading into the Big Ten. It's not what any of us were expecting back in August, early September, but that's where we are right now. It's a really concerning situation at USC.
Last topic, we'll get out of the Pac-12. Heisman Trophy wise, is in your view, is Penix the clear number one at this point? The Tampa kid, my guy here from Tampa Bay Tech High School here in Tampa, Florida, via Indiana. Is he obviously Caleb cannot be? I mean, he's clearly dropped down to 3 or 4 in the race. Is Penix, in your view, the clear number one right now?
No question. I mean, it's not just that he won a big game on national television, but he made clutch plays late to produce the win. Right? That's the real key. Heisman voters are going to look at that. It's going to be really hard to ignore. So it's going to take something special from someone else to really overtake him. Like that is obviously the Heisman moment so far this season. So unless or until we see something really special from someone else, this is definitely Penix's award to lose at this point. Also, just the fact that Washington beat Oregon, that dramatically increases the odds that Washington will, first of all, be in the Pac-12 championship game, and B, will be playing for a playoff berth in that Pac-12 championship game. And so that will give Penix the stage and the spotlight with which he can then cement the award with a big performance in that Pac-12 championship game.
All right, listen to Matt Zemek, editor of USA Today Trojan Wire. We're talking to Pac-12. We're going to hit some couple of national topics here, and got a couple of the big games of the week here, college football. How will the Brock Bowers injury affect Georgia? To me, that's a huge blow for Georgia. He was the one impact player they had on offense that you had to scheme around.
Yeah, so with Georgia, there was that one really good game against Kentucky, but of course Kentucky doesn't look that great. Kentucky lost to Missouri, and so I think that Georgia's going to get through the SEC because the SEC is just way down this year. Alabama's down, LSU is down, Jimbo's on the hot seat at A&M.
I think the game at Knoxville is going to be a test in November.
Maybe, but boy, Jason, did you see that A&M Vols game? That was an ugly game. That was one of the worst played football games you're going to see all year long. Like both teams just tripping over their shoelaces, trying to give the game away to the other. So like Joe Milton, $1 million arm, but nothing else. And also he's not getting help from his offensive line either. So I think Georgia makes it through the SEC, but then in the playoff, Georgia's going to go up against dynamic teams, and that's where the Brock Bowers absence is really going to show up.
I don't think you're going to see Bowers play again either because of his NFL status. I don't think he's going to come back and play unless he's 1,000% healthy, no doubt about it. Maybe the playoff game, but I don't think you'll see him in the regular season.
I agree, and let's all remember Nakobe Dean, right? He was supposed to be this first-round pick, and he fell all the way to 85, something like that with the Eagles. So Brock Bowers is aware of Nakobe Dean. That he's aware of that story, so he is going to protect his health to make sure he doesn't have that kind of fall on the draft board. Absolutely.
Is Oklahoma, obviously the big win over Texas a couple weeks ago, in your mind, is Oklahoma playoff caliber?
I think so. And this brings up a point about USC. Lincoln Riley, for those who are unaware, in 2017, his first year as Oklahoma head coach, he inherited Bob Stoops' strength and conditioning coach, a guy named Jerry Schmidt. But then Lincoln Riley wanted to bring in his own strength coach for 2018, Benny Wiley, who is the strength coach now at USC. And Oklahoma, it maintained a relatively high standard under Lincoln Riley, but never as good as 2017. Like 2017 was the high point. That was the best of Riley's OU teams. And it got slightly worse the more the program got away from Jerry Schmidt. Guess who's Brent Venables' strength and conditioning coach at Oklahoma? Jerry Schmidt. He came back the moment Lincoln Riley left.
Yeah.
And that's why Oklahoma has a physical, tough team once again. So and that's why I said earlier that Lincoln Riley needs to fire Benny Wiley, his strength coach, because Jerry Schmidt is obviously a much, much better strength and conditioning coach than Benny Wiley, and it's making a difference for Oklahoma right now.
No, you make a great point. Again, you're probably gonna have another matchup of Texas, Oklahoma, kind of like the Oregon, Washington. So it's gonna be interesting to see how the playoff committee, deals with those second matchups, especially if they split and they both win a game and they both have one loss. How that plays into playoff contention as far as comparing it with the ACC, the SEC, and the Big Ten. So, all right, let's get to the two big matchups of the week and get your thought here, and we'll get you out of here. To me, it's an elimination game in the SEC this week. Alabama, Tennessee. The losers out as far as a playoff berth, in my view. I think this is going to be more competitive. I think most people think Alabama's better, but I don't think Alabama's that much better than Tennessee right now. Your thoughts, Alabama, Tennessee?
Yeah, so a lot of the time people will try to ask and figure out which team's better. Well, to me, there are some occasions when it's a matter of figuring out which team is worse.
Right.
Because sometimes you win, like you make the more good plays, you do more things impressively, but there are plenty of sporting events where the outcome is decided not by who makes the great play, but who makes more mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's what we have with these teams. These teams have been struggling all year long. And so it's less about which team you trust. It's more about which team you should distrust. And I think Tennessee, based on that absolute slop fest against Texas A&M, I think Tennessee is the weaker team, the team more likely to make a mistake, the team more likely to crack in a pressure situation. I'm not impressed by Alabama at all. Like
Right.
Nick Saban's going to have a new offensive coordinator next year. Like this Tommy Rees thing has not worked out. I can't imagine Saban putting up with it for more than a year. It's not going well for Bama, but it's worse for Tennessee. Like the gap between Joe Milton and Hendon Hooker last year, it's a Grand Canyon size gap. So I think Tennessee's more likely to make the big mistake and Alabama's going to win. Not because Alabama's great. It isn't, but Tennessee's going to be worse.
Yeah, Joe Milton's probably been, to me, the biggest disappointment at quarterback this year in the country because everybody thought he would be able to step right in for Hendon Hooker. A lot of this, obviously they lost a lot of offensive guys. I get it, but he's just not been able to just complete the basic stuff. That he's been struggling to complete the basic stuff in the offense. That they've got a good running game. The defense has been a little bit better. But in order to beat Alabama, you've got to be able to throw the ball over the top, and you got to be able to complete the deeper balls. And he's just really struggled to do that so far. All right,
Joe
go ahead.
Joe Milton, Joe Milton reminds me of Jamarcus Russell. Like, he is a physical specimen. He is strong. He is fast, but it just doesn't come together within the flow of a game. There's real athletic ability there. Like, he looks like an athlete, but it just doesn't happen. And people keep waiting for it to happen, but it doesn't.
Yep. All right, let's go to the game of the week. Probably there's going to be a three-way matchup here between these three teams here in the next month or so. Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. You have the first one here this weekend in Columbus. Penn State at Ohio State. You got most people think these teams are playoff capable. James Franklin has had a disastrous run against top 10 teams, not had a very good record, but everybody thinks that he's got the quarterback this year, Drew Allard, to get it done. Just give me again, Penn State has played nobody. They played Delaware. They played UMass. Ohio State, they have played Notre Dame. Give them credit. They won a tight, tough game at Notre Dame, so give them credit, but their offense has not been as high octane as we thought they would be. Give me a thought on both Penn State and Ohio State.
Yeah, so, if you go through recent history with Penn State and Ohio State, this is usually a very competitive game. It's usually close in the fourth quarter. So I don't think there's any reason to deviate from that general game pattern this year. Ohio State beat Notre Dame, but of course, let's remember, Notre Dame dropped an interception on Ohio State's last drive, went right through the hands, should have been picked. And then, of course, Notre Dame leaves 10 men on the field at the very end. So, Ohio State got bailed out in that game. It wasn't an impressive offensive performance by any stretch. And, Notre Dame's offense has not gotten better since that game.
Right.
So, that wasn't an impressive performance from Ohio State by any means. And then Ohio State was in real trouble against Maryland, and Maryland squandered several opportunities to get a bigger lead in the first half of that game. Ohio State's offensive line is the problem because, Marvin Harrison Jr., brilliant receiver. Ohio State has the skill people on the perimeter, but, what's been Ohio State's problem the last 2 years? You can't get the ball to the skill people if Michigan is punching you in the mouth. Well, I think Penn State, similarly, can really feast on this Ohio State offensive line. I think it's going to be a low-scoring, very ugly game. And I certainly like Penn State plus the 4.5.
Right.
But I'm going to go one step beyond that, and I think Penn State wins outright in the shoe.
I'm with you. I think they're going to win the game too, and that obviously will set up the next part of the trilogy when you got Penn State and Michigan in Happy Valley in a couple of weeks. So, just give me a thought on Michigan. Is Michigan? I mean, obviously they've not played anybody either, just as bad as Penn State's schedule. Give me your thought on Michigan.
Well, so Michigan seemed to be jogging through the first few games of its schedule, but as soon as Michigan got to the Big Ten, started putting some thumpings on people. And was sluggish in the first quarter against Indiana, but then, turn it into high gear, won by 1 billion points. So, Michigan's beating the inferior Big Ten teams by 30, 35
Right.
points. So doing exactly what it's supposed to do certainly looks a lot more authoritative than both Ohio State and Penn State to this point in the season. And of course, Michigan gets Ohio State at home. Penn State, I think, is going to be the tougher game for Michigan since, as you said, it's in Happy Valley. But like right now, does anyone seriously think this Ohio State team's going to win in Ann Arbor? How things have changed in that rivalry.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this playoff committee, when they start meeting here, probably in the next couple of weeks, how they rank these teams initially, because there's a possibility for a lot of one-loss teams, one-loss conference championship teams, and if you're Florida State, you don't want to lose that last game, that ACC title game, and have one loss, because they might get left out there, and there will be some very interesting deliberations that go on in that CFP committee meetings. I think you're going to have a lot of one-loss teams there at the end of the year that somebody could get left out very easily.
That's right. I mean, we're still basically in the midpoint of the season, so it's hard to game out all the scenarios just yet. But that is a poker chip you want to have. That if you're in the clubhouse with no losses, there's no way you can be
left
excluded.
out.
As soon as you lose a game, then the committee has a reason to exclude you.
All right, Matt Zemek, great job, man. Great work. USA Today, Trojan Wire. Tell all the fans where they can find all your great work online, as well as on Twitter these days.
So trojanswire.usatoday.com. I'm writing about the crisis at USC and the things that Lincoln Riley needs to do, and Oklahoma fans being correct about Lincoln Riley, at least for this season. It's really about everything that Lincoln Riley has to try to do to get out of this mess, and also the problems that are staring him in the face and need some real mature solutions at USC. On Twitter at Trojans Wire, tweeting during the games, and hey, USC basketball just around the corner. I know Bronny James won't be playing the first several weeks of the season, but still, this is one of the most hyped USC basketball seasons in recent memory. So you'll want to follow in November Trojans Wire basketball coverage.
And if you remember us, we talked last time about a month ago, and Matt told you that Bronny probably would be out till January, and those were kind of the reports that came out. You probably won't see him probably till the beginning of the year, late December, early January, but you will see most likely Bronny James play for USC, which is a great thing to see. So, Matt, keep up the great work, man. We'll talk later as we get closer to the conference championship games, and keep doing a great job. And let's get your Diamondbacks to at least a fifth game there in Arizona, okay?
We'll see about that.
All right, buddy.
Thanks,
Take care. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.